And welcome to a bundled up South Florida SimWorld Today edition. It is a crisp 47 degrees here in South Florida, which means it's time to get a little warm. Woke up a little chilly today. I woke up chilly because I'm also alone in the booth. There's no one to share this cold weather with, so we're doing a solo edition of SimWorld Today. We got plenty to get to. We have a bunch of major upsets in SimWorld U last night. A night littered with upsets. We've got some conversation on freshmen being potential top 5 picks if they were allowed to come out. Of course, they cannot. But let's start with postseason football, which begins this weekend, January 11th, the AFC side of the bracket, January 12th, the NFC side of the bracket. What are the expectations? The expectations come in, and they're obviously very lofty and different for each team. For me, no surprise to say that there's high expectations of the Rams, but I think the Detroit Lions enter with unquestionably the highest expectation. The number one team in the NFC, coming off a very dominant win over the Minnesota Vikings on the last game of the regular season. Yes, Kansas City is your defending champions. Yes, they're going to be a team that everybody is going to think highly of because they're trying to get to a third straight title. But to me, Detroit is in a very rare situation. They have caught lightning in a bottle. Now, Detroit could be like Kansas City before. Kansas City caught lightning in a bottle. At least we thought it was lightning in a bottle. It turned out Patrick Mahomes was maybe on his pathway to becoming the greatest quarterback of all time. They have since caught lightning in a bottle much more than once. Detroit, though, coming up after a NFC Championship game appearance last season, now has to find a way to replicate this going forward. It is the challenge of football, and we've seen how fleeting moments of relevancy can be. Trust me when I tell you it can be fleeting. But we also see that there can be moments of extension. Even Philadelphia, a team that had that early championship during the Doug Peterson era, they have been unable to capture that same energy, especially coming off of making the the Super Bowl 2 years ago. They have not been that same team. Now they're back into contention. So for me, the high expectations come from Detroit. How are you going to seize on the greatest season in Detroit history? Because I said it yesterday to Rick, I do not really believe that history should predict a team's future. Now, just because the Detroit Lions have sucked for all of their eternity does not mean they can't win a Super Bowl. But there's going to be that energy in a game because fans do feel like Rick feels. And Rick's point yesterday is not a wrong one. It's just maybe not one that I agree with in terms of the past representing the future. Detroit Lions fans are going to feel like if you get to their divisional round game and they're going to play whoever's the lowest seed left standing, it very well could be the Vikings if they take down the Rams, could be the Commanders, could be the Packers. There's going to be a sense at some point in that football game that doom and gloom has returned. And it's going to be very difficult for that sense not to make its way onto the football field. Now, Dan Campbell, I think, has done a fantastic job with this football team, but the expectations suddenly in Detroit are so much higher than they've ever been before because they've never reached this spot before. They've never been the number one seed with a bona fide favoritism aura about them. I'll add a couple more in terms of big expectations. I think there's high expectations for Philadelphia. Mentioned they were here. They made it to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. You enter the season with the conversation about Nick Sirianni. There's the question mark about their quarterback. I think that's a very big real chance that there's disappointment in the Packers season and in the Packers future. So I think there's high expectations from there, and I do think there's high expectations for the Ravens. Lamar Jackson may be playing some of his best football. There's the case to be made for him as the MVP. He's going to have to try to find a way to win football games, and if he falls short, you could say the same thing, make the same argument about the Bills. If they fall short to, again, Kansas City, the worst version of this Kansas City team that we've ever seen, if you're not looking at the record, I think that's going to be a massive, massive letdown for any team that comes up short. But Lions are my highest expectation. All right, let's move on to high expectations in college basketball. While freshmen cannot enter the SWBA draft, there certainly begs the question, would any of them go top 5? Cooper Flag excluded. Now, if you look at Bleacher Report's prospect rankings, they have the only other freshman, Dylan Harper, ranked at number 5 out of Rutgers. I think he's a guy that certainly could go top 5. But if we're looking at this group right now, and you're saying, how do I find a top 5? I think if Cooper Flag is eligible for the draft, your top 5 looks like something. Cooper Flag, Lamarian Sherwood, Jamison Johnson, Trey Turner, and I would put Cooper King across in as the fifth guy. So how do we crack that list? Is there any freshman who can crack that list right now? I don't think it's Dylan Harper because I don't think he's a better prospect right now than either of the two guards slash forwards that we mentioned. Trey Turner listed as a forward. I'd consider him to be a two guard if I had an opportunity. The only other freshman that I think is capable of making that leap, it's not Cam Jones at SMU. It's Arthur Lattimore in Texas. I said I think Arthur Lattimore is a top 10 pick in the upcoming draft if he were to go. I do think he's a freshman that could make the leap getting into the top 10 because he does the things that you're looking for. He's a dominant inside presence. I think his game, as we've seen it evolve into the college ranks, it's very Giannis Antetokounmpo-esque, right? He's a downhill threat, but he's not a big man. He's not a center. He's going to be ideally suited next to a stretch big, somebody, Trayton Hendon, who I've talked plenty of. That's a stretch five right there if Trayton Hendon can figure out how to play the rebounding game. But I think Arthur Lattimore's got the opportunity. He would be the one to make it in. Now, do I think he is a top 5 pick? That's a very big difference, right, between could he be and is he actually. I don't think he actually is, but I could see a team talking their way into Arthur Lattimore if he was available right now because he's a dominant scorer. He can get inside the paint. He's a versatile defender. His jump shot isn't quite there, but again, if you pair him next to a shooting 5 or you go small ball and you've got 4 shooters around him, if he's the 5, I really, really think he could be blossoming at the next level to be a top 5 pick. Is he going to be? Would he be this season? He just doesn't rise to the level because you have to look around at the other pieces of talent that exist. And Trey Turner, Cooper King across, to me, are the back end of the top 5 with the assumption that Sherwood and Johnson would be bona fide top 3 picks. I don't think Arthur Lattimore is cracking over those two, though I think his skill set is certainly good enough to get there. Good enough to get there was not the case for some of our top 25 teams last night, as our Tuesday night was absolutely obliterated with blowouts from, or rather upsets from, the number 8 team in the country going down all the way down to number 25. So you got Xavier, who takes down SMU at home 64-62. Davidson loses to Minnesota 80-67, their second straight loss. Number 13, Princeton Maryland goes down to Princeton. New Mexico survives, Georgetown does not. They lose 67-64, and then San Diego State falls to Richmond. So the question is, do you buy into upsets? I don't really buy into upsets because, one, I thought Princeton was a top 25. It's not listed as a top 25 team. I could have sworn they were a top 25 team. But anyhow, Princeton's a really good basketball team, playing at home. Really, if you look at this, in my opinion, the only team that I'm concerned about of those losses is Davidson. Because Georgetown, you're on the road, you lose by 3. That's a game you'd like to win, but Jackson State is still a pretty decent basketball team, and they got a really decent point guard at the helm when he's on. We talked about Princeton being a good basketball team. Xavier has hung around. They had that tough stretch a week ago where they had to go at UCLA, at San Diego State. They hung around in those games for the most part. So to get a win by 2 points against SMU, I'm really not going to be beating myself up over. You don't like San Diego State losing at home to Richmond. That's the only team that was at home that was a top 25 team that lost last night. But they still played a decent basketball game. They lost late. But the one thing that can't stand out is Davidson. Second straight loss coming off that Boise State loss. That is absolutely atrocious. And this is a team that was really trending upwards. They had a really great run over the last couple of days, playing better basketball, putting themselves into a position. Getting to number 16 is not easy to do, especially for a team that has not traditionally been in a non-Power 5 conference, that is just now getting the introduction to the American. The SP Top 25 always was holding back on Princeton, who has been an Ivy League, now an American Conference team. But suddenly Davidson starts winning games, and they're like, no problem. I mean, talk about a bias towards a school. Davidson, with Benari James, who probably is worth the conversation in the last segment we did, they just got to bypass all of the drama, got to bypass all of the restrictions that the SP Top 25 put on Princeton, and they get to move all the way up there. Suddenly that doesn't look all that intelligent because they did not play a good basketball game. They got handily beat. They lost by 13. They lost in double figures. They did not come to show up. And that's a game you have to come to show up. If you're going to get beat by Boise State, who has probably had the second worst season of any college basketball program in the country, if you lose to them, you better come out the gates the following day to play a better but better team, but you got to play a better game than that. And Davidson fell flat. I think that is an indictment on the coaching staff being able to put these players in a position to win. I think it's a lack of preparedness. I think it's a lack of seriousness. And we've seen this from Davidson. You talk about they went down to Miami on New Year's Eve. They had to fly back up to North Carolina and they got beat on New Year's Day. So this is a team that has shown us that they have a history of not showing up in the second night of games. And that was a game last night that they absolutely had to show up in. All right, let's get to our wrap up. I mentioned we had a lot of games going on last night. We are going to get to every single one of them as we close out our morning here on SimWorld today. So let's start with the top 25 team that could get it done, and that would be the one and only St. Johnny's, as they get a win over Nevada 71-64. A big night from Keyshawn Shipp, 20 points and 7 boards, as he has looked to kind of roll back since his initial injury scare. Harvard beats St. Mary's 78-59. St. Mary's case as a top 25 team may be up. Macklin Mighty 15-5 for the Crimson in their win at home. UConn hosting Houston, a 67-55 win for the Huskies, as Fareed Redmond, the gunner, goes 7 of 19, but he does end up with a double-double, 17 and 10 in the win as UConn gets up to 7-6. The Cougars' struggles continue throughout the season. VCU hosted Rutgers, and despite a late turnover that gave VCU a lead, it would be that man right there, Dylan Harper, saving the day. 14 points in a full 40-minute effort in a 64-63 win for the Scarlet Knights. SMU going on the road. We chatted about it briefly. A 64-62 win for Xavier. Miller McCabe 18-8 for the Musketeers. A tough night from Cam Jones. 5 points, 1 of 5 shooting, 1 of 4 from deep in the loss for SMU, as their 3-point barrage did not go well. Davidson falls at home to Minnesota 80-65 because Deontay Odom and Deontay Odom couldn't get it done because it was Bradley Antone and Donald Affetti. 19 from Antone, 17 from Affetti, and the Golden Gophers walk out with a 6-3 win, 6-3 record. Talk about a team that could be a top 25 team next week. Princeton, they go to Maryland, they host Maryland with a 76-68 win. Tyshawn Penn, 19-7-5. Fill up the stat sheet, young man. Cooper King crosses 20 points on 8 of 13. Not enough for Maryland. Wisconsin and New Mexico. New Mexico, a new arriver to the top 25. They dominate with an 85-71 win. Taz Cooper, 16-11, a double-double there. Jackson State, talk about it. They beat Georgetown at home. D. Woodley with a late bucket, but it's 18 from Roy Mason and a 67-64 win for Jackson State at home. Colorado State playing host to Iowa. Lamarian Sherwood, hello, how you doing? Good afternoon. 39-8-7 for the presumptive number 1 pick. Goes 19 for 19 from the floor. Folks, the player of the week discussion has been decided. San Diego State at home, they fall to Richmond 55-51. Richmond has just one player in double figures, 11 points from Francisco Fortunato. Do not put a 4 in front of that name, as Richmond walks away with a win. I can't get over that. What a night from Lamarian Sherwood, 39-8-7. I said I might take Cooper King across number 1 over him. I don't know if I can justify that one anymore, because my goodness gracious, Sherwood is a problem. All right, Wednesday night basketball. You know what that means. We've got our game of the week tonight at 6:30. That's Maryland and Villanova. Cooper King across. Save my day, please. And Villanova's Justin Bell go at it at 6:30 p.m. in Villanova. Matinee action. And then 8 p.m. on SimWorld TV again. Virginia and Creighton. Absolutely great schedule for us. A very, very full schedule. Number of games going off tonight on SimWorld U. We'll recap all of that tomorrow. We'll recap everything else in the basketball world, as there's some continuing trends in the SWBA. Do we have a trade coming our way? What's going on in Phoenix? Golden State is atrocious. We'll get to some of those things tomorrow on SimWorld today. Thank you all for joining us. Appreciate you being here. We'll talk to you again tomorrow morning on SimWorld TV, the only place you can see the game, be the game.
This has been a presentation